Hate and misinformation have surged online since the brutal Hamas attack on Israel, and social media companies are facing criticism for what's happening on their platforms. NBC News correspondent Miguel Almaguer has the details of one particularly alarming trend on TikTok.
TikTok removing the hashtag Letter to America from its search function after a flood of viral videos showed U.S. users sharing the words penned by Osama bin Laden after 9/11, which includes anti-Semitic language and condemns U.S. support for Israel.
It's wild.
After the content was widely shared on multiple platforms, the White House said there is never a justification for spreading the repugnant, evil, and anti-Semitic lies that the leader of al-Qaeda issued just after committing the worst terrorist attack in American history. TikTok adding, content promoting this letter clearly violates our rules on supporting any form of terrorism, vowing to remove the posts.
Something can go viral, as we have said, incredibly quickly. And if a fact check is coming through 24 hours after a piece of content has gone viral and already received hundreds of millions of views, at that point, it's very hard to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak.
With millions of views on TikTok, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue says references to Letter to America also spiked on X, more than 738 million impressions across that platform.
Joining me now, Olivia Juliana, an activist and digital strategist, and Victor Shi, the strategy director for Voters of Tomorrow and co-host of the iGen podcast. All right. Y'all already know how I feel about this thing right here. You know, Olivia, it feels like in recent years that several states, not even just feels like, several states they've implemented this vague, divisive concept laws. And the laws, they prevent teachers from discussing difficult concepts like the Israel-Hamas war. So the question is this like a media literacy issue, or is this an education issue overall? Because it's hard to think critically about what you're seeing online when you don't have any context about what it is you are actually looking at.
Mm-hmm. I think it's an education issue. I think it's a media issue. I think it's a conversational issue. I think we've all very clearly seen the Israel-Hamas conflict playing out online, and from the testimonies from people who are all over the world in the last few days and the last few weeks. And I think that what was happening on TikTok, I've been a content creator for 3 years now when it comes to politics, is I think the people we saw engaging with this letter in an agreeable way are people who are not traditionally engaged in politics or traditionally engaged on Middle Eastern issues that have been brought up in the last few years. I think what we saw are people who are not familiar, who know that there's something very deeply upsetting to people going on in the world right now, and they're looking for reasons and they're looking for information about it. And they happen to find something that is full of a very hateful, extreme ideology. And I think if there had been more media literacy in schools and understanding what we see on social media, I think if there had been more information in schools about conflicts, not just in the United States, but around the world, that we wouldn't see people who are not traditionally engaged in this space kind of flocking to things like Letter to America. Because I've seen people on both sides of this different issue come out and condemn people who were praising Osama bin Laden, saying this is not representative of people who were traditionally engaged in this area.
Yeah, it was, I mean, Victor, it was very confusing to me. It was straight up misinformation. It made me think about all of the families who lost someone on 9/11. But you know what, this misinformation, it's not new. And misinformation is not just happening on TikTok. It's happening on Facebook. It's happening on the site formerly known as Twitter. And I think nowadays we should be thinking about some solutions. There are a lot of politicians, including Republican presidential candidate Chris Christie, who said that the solution is to just ban TikTok. But I don't know if that is actually going to solve anything. So what is an actual realistic solution?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're exactly right. And first of all, I think we should
totally condemn any single defense or justification of what Osama bin Laden did on 9/11. It's just so unrepresentative. And like Olivia said, they represent a very tiny and I think extreme segment of the TikTok sort of platform and the Gen Z electorate. But to your point, I don't think banning TikTok is any realistic solution. It seems to me like a very short-term problem to a very long-term problem. And I think we have to be very clear-eyed about what the solution is. And my view, that is, like Olivia said, doing more to enact media literacy and information literacy, doing more to teach young people how to separate fact from fiction, truth from lies. And I think, let's not kid ourselves. Misinformation and falling for conspiracy theories isn't just something that happens to young people. It happens to every generation. It goes back to the start of time. Yes, social media does accelerate it a little bit more, but we have people falling for conspiracy theories throughout the generational spectrum. So I think we have to think more about what are some more realistic solutions than just banning TikTok, because that's not going to make young people stop using social media. That's going to make young people go to other social media platforms, and that doesn't lessen the amount of misinformation and conspiracy theories that might be spread. We're seeing this on other platforms as well. So I don't think that's a very realistic solution. I think we have to spend a lot more time thinking about how we can craft algorithms better, how we can think about information literacy in a more sustainable way.
Olivia, as you look towards 2024, what is heavy on your mind when it comes to young voters, young people online?
I look for what we look for in 2020, doing the same exact thing, which is the spread of misinformation and disinformation, whether it's fake news in a way being spread on purpose or on accident. I'm looking to see if we're able to mitigate some of the false narratives that are being put out there, specifically to target young people, because that's specifically what's going on. Is they're targeting an informed electorate to deter them from voting.
Well, folks should follow some young content creators who know what they're talking about, like Olivia Juliana and Victor Shi. Victor, I love your podcast. I will be listening. Happy belated birthday, Olivia. Thank you both very, very much for your time. I will chat with you again very, very soon.